what's up, you guys? So, hopefully this comes out okay. I don't have a tripod right now. I don't know where it went. I have a sneaking suspicion it has gone missing. Um, so yeah, you're being propped up precariously on my sewing machine, um, in a very precarious situation, but as long as it is propped up. So, today we're going to be talking about what you guys requested, and that was to talk about my conditions and kind of why I use a wheelchair and those kinds of things, because I haven't really discussed exactly what's going on. If you see me looking down, I have a list just because I'm having some brain fog issues today. It's really hard for me to kind of concentrate. So I have a list just to keep me kind of on track and to not ramble on, because this is going to be kind of an in-depth video. Not extremely, but just kind of going over how I got diagnosed, what I'm diagnosed with, and kind of the effects of what EDS does to my body in particular. To start this off, I will say EDS affects everybody differently. It is a spectrum. It's a spectrum disorder where you can have people who are, hospitalized or completely very, very, very hindered. And then you have people who are like my sister who have EDS and who really don't have too many adverse issues. They still have issues, but they're not nearly as hindered as other individuals are. So you can be at either end of the spectrum. And they now created hypermobility, just having hypermobility and it being completely separate from EDS. So under the new diagnostic criteria, my sister would actually be under the hypermobile criteria, and I would be under EDS. So she would no longer even fall under the EDS diagnosis anymore. She still has it. She still technically, has EDS. It's just not as hindering on her body. So basically, to start this off, story-wise, is that I had a lot of symptoms early on in childhood that showed that there was something wrong. In childhood, I've broken 28 bones in my body. That does not include sprains, tears, and ruptures of other ligaments and things like that. That is just broken bones. And I would break them doing normal things. I broke my finger playing tetherball. I broke my finger swimming. I broke my ankles so many times that they were going to put rods through my ankles to hold them in place. And at this time, I was physically fit. I played soccer, and I was fit. I was healthy. Aside from, I had really severe allergies all my life, to the point that I would get allergy shots, and I was very, very allergic to stuff. So I showed early symptoms of something quite not being right. They thought I had a bone disorder that caused me to break things so much, but nothing ever came out of it, and they just kind of brushed it off. So basically, I lived most of my childhood relatively normal. I always had issues, always hurt, broke bones, all that stuff. But it wasn't until I hit puberty, and right after I stopped maturing, I started deteriorating. So when my body stopped growing, my body started to break down. And by the time I was 15, I was miserable. I was in so much pain all the time. I was exhausted. I could hardly function at school. It was awful. And I couldn't perform at school. And it had nothing to do with my intelligence or understanding the material. I was an honors student, straight A student, up until I got sick, and I was exhausted. I hurt. I was in and out of the hospital, and it's hard to perform when you're sick. And basically, my school tried to accommodate me, and by tried to accommodate me in quotation marks, because they tried to do the minimal that they could. They didn't really care. um, I at that point I wasn't in a wheelchair. I wasn't visibly disabled. I was kind of a outcast, kind of, I stuck to myself. And they didn't care. Literally, after I did online classes with them inside their building, so you would go to a separate area and do online classes. Um, Basically, after that, they tried to do homeschool, and they literally forgot me. Like, they didn't bring me my paperwork, they didn't contact me, no one did anything. I was just on my own. So at that point, my mom just was done fighting with them. So I dropped out, and I immediately went and got my GED. I graduated at the top of my county. It was never a thing of me not understanding material or not being smart enough to go to school. It was never like that. And I did, I graduated. I think I graduated early, actually. Technically, I graduated early. But yeah. During all of that, I had just been diagnosed at 15. So I'm sorry about this, but it's gonna have to stay. It sucks. I can't help it. But it's either this or you're sideways, and no one wants that. So ignore this little blip. But got diagnosed at Cincinnati Children's by a geneticist that actually is number 3 in his field in the whole country. There's not very many people who specialize in Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And I was very fortunate to be seen and diagnosed by a geneticist who, was a professional and an expert in his field. But after being diagnosed, it was one of those things that I always knew something was wrong. My mom had already been diagnosed and had her own issues. My mom was sick for years. For years. 10 or 12 years, my mom was sick before she got diagnosed. So that was really hard. And there were times my mom almost died. It was not good. And I had no idea what was going on. And we had no idea anything that was going on. My mom didn't have any answers. So, being diagnosed, I was scared. And I grieved. I did. I was happy to have an answer and to be diagnosed and, be told, like, you have this, you're not crazy. But on the other hand, there's a lot of uncertainty that comes with it. There's a lot of fear and anger and accepting that you're sick, and there's nothing they can do. Nothing. There is no cure. There is no quick fix. They can just try and make you as comfortable as you can, and you learn to live with it. It's as simple as that. So at that point, I kind of went through stages of grief. I went into denial, and just I didn't want to hear it. I was a kid. I was 15, 16. Didn't want to hear it. And at that point, I was around 16 years old when I was told, at the rate that my body was going and at the issues that I had, I would probably be in a wheelchair before I was 25. And that, that was going to be something that I needed to think about and understand. So that I had already kind of processed being diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos. And at that point, I lost it. I was angry. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to believe any of it. I was angry. and I pushed myself. I acted out. I was an asshole. I was an a-hole as a teenager because I was so mad at everything. You know, I had dealt with so much trauma already, which I'll discuss in another video eventually, maybe. I dealt with a lot as a kid, and this just, it hurt a lot for me to, have to accept that everything that I knew and everything that I loved to do was going to change, whether I liked it or not. So, at that time, I was, at this point, I had graduated and I was in college, and then I was told I was going to be in a wheelchair, and I had to drop out of college because I was a cosmetology major. I was going to cosmetology school, and I couldn't perform. I couldn't do it. I hurt so bad, and I was pushing myself to the point where, like, I literally would choose to eat or shower. So I was really just pushing myself way too hard, and at that point I got into a really bad car accident, and that time off I quickly realized that I wasn't going to be able to keep up with it. There was no way for me to have longevity. Being a cosmetologist is already very physically demanding, let alone being disabled on top of it. And, if the prognosis is true, I'm only going to be able to use my education for a couple years, and, I was going to be in a wheelchair. Well, come to find out, I ended up being 19-ish, almost 20 when I got a wheelchair. Ended up having to use a wheelchair. So it was sooner than we thought. So at that point, I got diagnosed with dysautonomia. I have vasovagal syncope, or vasovagal syndrome. It would be considered vasovagal syndrome because it is chronic. It's not a symptom of something else. It's a form of dysautonomia. So I got diagnosed with that, and then I got diagnosed with fibromyalgia. I'm sure everybody knows what fibro is. It's more common, and it's more talked about, fibromyalgia. And I'm currently in the process of being tested and checked for MCAS. My body overreacts to everything. Like I said, when I was a kid, I was allergic to everything. When I say that my throat would swell shut when I would go outside, I was miserable. I really was. And it's getting worse now. It kind of went away for a few years, but I think with the mild winter and things like that, it's hard for me to go outside. I've had to start carrying my rescue inhaler with me again, and masking myself again to go, outside and do stuff, which really sucks. But, I'd rather do that than, not be able to breathe and have my throat swell shut. So, trade-offs. At this time, I also got, recently was diagnosed, years ago I was diagnosed with CPTSD. That's been a thing for years. I got diagnosed when I was 13 or 14 years old, with CPTSD. Like I said, I dealt with some very traumatic, very, very bad crap when I was a kid. And it stuck and has stuck. I also was involved with some really bad relationship situations when I was, a teenager. And I got myself into some pretty dangerous stuff. I'm not proud of everything in the situations that I was in. I'm not. I probably won't talk about it publicly, just because it's no one's business but the people that I choose. But yeah, and as as part of the trauma, I developed bipolar 2, to try and cope. dealing with the trauma made my body change. Trauma can make your brain change. So yeah, bipolar 2. Basically, the effects of EDS, I thought I would go over the effects for me personally after, I kind of discussed everything that I've been diagnosed with. What exactly EDS entails for me personally as, my own individual patient. With my EDS, I deal with a lot of balance issues. So it's very difficult for me to feel where I am in space. How they describe it is basically your brain doesn't register that you have a body. Your brain thinks that you're just kind of a floating head. So it's hard to feel where my feet are. It's hard to feel where my hands are in space. And without being able to touch something to kind of feel where I am, I'm very unbalanced. I walk like a newborn baby gazelle. This kind of goes along, doesn't exactly go with EDS, but it's a comorbid disorder. So syncope, obviously I have vasovagal syncope, but on top of all of that, I have sinus tachycardia, which is an irregular rhythm of the heart that goes along with my vasovagal. So my heart goes into an irregular rhythm, and that causes me to feel like I'm going to pass out. Sometimes I do. I haven't in quite some time though. I'm on medication, and it's very difficult for me now with all the medication that I'm on to fully lose consciousness. I haven't fully lost consciousness in years because of my medication. Thank God, knock on wood. I deal with so many dislocations and subluxations that I can't even count. I wake up every morning and have to put my hips back. My shoulders will click in and out of place the whole time I push my wheelchair. I threw my back out, putting the seat out, looking for my phone the other day, threw my back out. And it caused part in my back to shift, and I had to just sit there and have my cousin, actually, he rubbed my back for me to try and get it to go back, and it popped and it went back. But sometimes if I bend down, my ribs will subluxate, so they'll move. It's very painful because then it feels like I'm being stabbed in the chest. And that kind of goes with I'm in a lot of pain all the time. People with EDS, oftentimes we are very good at hiding our pain, or we cope with pain because we're in pain all the time. So nothing's different. That's normal to us. So, you cope with pain. Higher pain days though, you don't want to do anything. You don't. You lay in bed, you take a lot of medication sometimes, and you don't move. And it sucks, and that's kind of part of life, and it's never going to go away. And it's getting harder to get pain management situations under control anymore because of, the opiate epidemic. So, not to mention, medical marijuana is extremely expensive. So, it's very difficult to get a good pain management going on. It's very hard for me to hear and process things when more than one thing is going at once. So being in large groups or very loud places, it's very difficult for me to be able to understand what someone is saying, especially if it's dark and I can't see and read lips. It's very difficult. I've had several ruptures and tears in my eardrums when I was a kid because of all the I had a lot of fluid buildup, and it would rupture my eardrums. So I've dealt with that most of my life. So it's very difficult for me to be in situations where there's a lot going on. My nails don't grow properly. I have another video where my nails are grown out, and they're completely see-through and they completely bend. There is no structure to them whatsoever. Like, they're see-through. You can see my nails straight through to the other side. Again, EDS is a collagen defect, so that's kind of why it does that. Your nails are made of keratin, collagen, and that's what forms your nails. So one of those things is faulty, so, you got jacked up nails, which is why I usually have falsies on, acrylics, or I try and gel polish over my nails to try and hide them as much as I can. I deal with a lot of nausea and vomiting. That is from a adrenal dump, which I discussed it in a past video, where my body doesn't understand that it doesn't need all of the adrenaline. So when something happens and your body goes into fight or flight mode, normally, like someone scares you, you're like, oh, wow, that was kind of scary, and you're fine. Your heart goes back to normal. Mine doesn't do that. My body dumps all of my adrenaline. It throws my heart into an irregular rhythm, throws it into sinus tachycardia, and I shake uncontrollably. It's like the biggest hit of coffee you've ever done, ever. And you just shake, and it's exhausting because all your muscles tense, all your muscles are quivering, and when it's done, you're exhausted. Your muscles get so tired from that constant stimulation and moving that it's exhausting. So I try and avoid anything that's going to cause an adrenal dump, just because it sucks a lot, and it's dangerous to throw my heart into a regular rhythm like that, so try and avoid it. The fatigue, basically being tired all the time, and it's not just like, oh, I'm kind of tired. No, you're exhausted all the time. Like I said, I used to choose whether to shower or to eat. I was tired. I still am tired all the time. So, what you think is, oh, well, it's not that hard, or, oh, well, it's just this one thing. It's not like that to people who are chronically ill, or people with EDS, or who deal with fatigue at all. It's not like that. What you see is something small might be a big achievement to somebody with a disability. Me picking up my house and cleaning up my house, that might seem like, oh, it's pretty normal, but it's exhausting to me, and it'll put me in bed for 2 days sometimes if I really, deep clean my house. It's exhausting. I've dealt with migraines my whole life. Ever since I can probably remember, actually. Like, I was 8, 9 years old dealing with migraines, and migraines so bad I would be hospitalized. Like, I would have to be in the hospital. They were so bad. So, yeah. I'm on a decent regimen, kind of. Like, they have a good plan for me to go to the hospital, get treatment, and it goes away. But with everything going on, with the things we cannot say, because I'll get demonetized, going on, everything is shut down. So I'm just kind of waiting to go back to the doctor and discuss other options for like preventative medications, and I think we might try the IV treatment to try and do IV fluids. This kind of goes with the fibro. I have severe neurological issues and neurological damage in some parts of my body because of the frequent dislocations in my body. I have nerve flares, so all my nerves fire at once, and it feels like someone is literally like stabbing me and lighting my skin on fire. That's the only way that I can describe it to somebody who's never felt it. It is excruciating. If you've ever been tased, that initial feeling of like, it's painful. It's like a burning sensation, but it's all over my body. Or painful cold chills is what I usually get. I have issues communicating from my head to my hands to tell me to pick things up. So oftentimes, it's pretty easy. You go to pick something up, you pick it up. My body, I go to pick it up, I think that I have a hold of it, and I don't. And I drop it. Or, it slips through my hands. Those kinds of things. It's very annoying. And it gets very frustrating very quickly. I get very angry days that it's really bad, because it's very frustrating for me to constantly be dropping things. I don't feel where my feet are in space, so a lot of the times it's referred to as drop foot. I'll trip over my own feet because I think that I am stepping high enough, and I am not, and I trip over my own feet. So a lot of the times I just shuffle. I don't fully take my feet off the ground, so I can feel where I am. And especially when I'm at home, I know where everything is. I can navigate my house in the dark and know where everything is. And I have stuff to touch at all times so that I have balance. I can't do that outside of my house, which is why I use a chair. It's why I use a service dog outside of my house. You can control how your house is designed. You can control what's inside your house. And it kind of goes along with, I get pins and needles in my hands, and it's hard to feel my hands sometimes. Parts of my body will just go completely numb. It's like, normal people can sit on the ground and it'd be fine. I cannot, because it pinches nerves and they go numb, and then I can't feel my legs. So that kind of goes along. I have hip dysplasia as well. So yeah, like a dog. It's basically the same general concept, is that your hips are being pushed out of alignment, because my hips are so weak, and I've pulled so many ligaments and muscles in my hips that no longer can hold itself together. They're very loose and lax, and they just kind of wobble around. And it's very painful. But usually, because of how much neurologic damage has been done in the socket, they move around and it doesn't hurt. It's when it finds a place that it hasn't done that before, or that it hasn't hit before, it's very painful. Very, very painful. And then also, like I said, from today, I have brain fog. You can... No. Absolutely not. It's just the neighbor. You could tell me, like, oh, go get this, 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 and this. And it's going to be very difficult for me to remember that on some days, especially if I am not in my chair and I'm having to focus on how to walk, not pass out, feel where I am in space, and focus on being able to walk. I know that sounds crazy to some people, but imagine having to think to walk. It's automatic for people. I have autonomic issues. Autonomic meaning automatic neurological signals. I don't have control over that. So it's very difficult for me to be able to tell my body how to do things, because sometimes the signal just doesn't get there. So imagine, having to tell yourself how to walk constantly when you're walking, and focusing on, my foot needs to go here, my foot needs to go here. Don't lock your knees because you'll fall over. Focus on not letting your knees splay out because they'll dislocate. I have to clench my pelvis, basically do one giant Kegel to hold my hips together while I walk. So what people see as a 21-year-old who, looks normal when I'm not, obviously in my chair, or Denali's not in vest, I look normal. Little do they know, I'm having to focus so hard on existing that I can't enjoy anything else. And I'm in so much pain that I don't even want to be out. I don't even want to do anything. So what's the point? And I think a lot of people don't understand that just because you can walk doesn't mean that it's the right thing. Especially, for people who have neurologic disorders, and for people who, there's lots of para people and quad people actually who can walk, but it's not a good walk. It's not a comfortable walk. It's not a sustainable walk. And I think a lot of people, I can load my chair myself. And when people see me, transfer to stand and load my chair and then, hobble myself into my car, they're like, oh, well, she can walk, so she's faking it. And that's not true. That's not how any of it works. 80% of wheelchair users can walk. In some capacity. They have some use. 80%. And it's very close-minded. But you deal with it because we've come a long way in 10 years. Maybe in my lifetime things will be easier. We can only hope. But that's not always the case. And you kind of just have to accept that. And if you can't be the positive, then what's the point? I try and be as positive as I can while not being walked all over. I will say that. I'm not going to be a pushover to people being a butthole to me. If you're going to treat me like crap, I'm not going to put up with it. But yeah, try and be as understanding as you can. And, I get it. I used to be, one of those people that's like, oh, well, they must not really need it, when I was very young. Because I didn't understand. I wasn't part of that community. I get it. But, we notice your looks. We notice the things you say and pointing and my cat. We notice. We do. And no one wants that. Imagine if it was you, or if it was your kid. You wouldn't want that. So just be respectful. I'm just a person who sits down. I'm just a person who uses an assistance animal. Treat it as if I was any other person, because I am. I just do it differently. And same thing goes, I always say this, if you don't laugh at things, you'll cry about them. Have a good sense of humor. Laugh. Don't take things too close to heart. In addressing the fact that, the comments on my videos, there's been people who, oh, you're fake, or, oh, you're fat, and, you don't need it, and why do you need it if you can walk, and just being negative. And if you really have that much time on your hands, maybe you need to fix something. Because I've spent around 8 years being disabled and living like that. So I've had plenty of time to come to terms with things and understand that, it's out of my control. And the people who matter are going to, be there for you and be understanding. And the people who don't, they don't matter. They're not even a blip on the radar. If they don't accept that you're disabled, if they don't accept your boundaries, they are not your friends. They are not people you need to be around. Don't do that to yourself. And I know it's easier said than done. I get it. I really do. But understand that sometimes being alone is the best thing that you can do. I feel more loved now having one best friend in my family than I ever did when I had lots of friends. I feel more loved and cared for now than I ever did. It's about quality over quantity, and especially when you are disabled. So just take a step back sometimes and view it from the outside looking in, whether these people are really your friends and whether these people actually care about you. And understand you can still be around and talk to people and not give them everything and not trust them with everything. You know, it sucks. I get it. I do. But, you know, you just kind of have to understand not everybody is your friend, even though they say they are. But hopefully this kind of explains everything. You know, if you have any questions about the things that I talked about today, or to talk about in more specifics, or you want to know anything like that, please comment, let me know. You know, I will respond as much as I can, or, you know, as much as I'm comfortable with. And, you know, if you have any questions, contact me, let me know. But yeah, I hope that this kind of explained things or helped somebody kind of understand what EDS is, and understand my conditions. But yeah, Denali, come say bye. Oh, stretch, big stretch. Come, up, all the way, up. Yeah, baby. But yeah, I hope to see you guys next time. Hopefully this turned out okay. Again, sorry for the blip. But yeah, I'll see you guys next time.